We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It is Monday, and we could be watching the start of a shit show today. We know that Donald Trump's Manhattan District criminal trial starts back up again today, and we're hearing that Michael Cohen may be on the witness stand. Now, this is going to be interesting. Michael Cohen is kind of a weird witness. Both sides have some issues with him. The judge has some issues with him. You'll remember last week, the judge told the prosecution, you need to have Michael Cohen stop talking about the case, stop talking about Donald Trump. And I don't know if they did or not, but it seems like he's cooled out a little bit. But the fact of the matter is Michael Cohen is important to the prosecution because he ties everything together and he can show how Donald Trump was involved every step of the way with paying the money to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal and other situations. Now, of course, Donald Trump's team is going to try to discredit him because this guy lied under oath. He was sent to jail. But what they have to remember is the reason he lied under oath and the reason he was sent to jail is because he was protecting Donald Trump. That puts a little different spin on it. So the other point to consider, too, is if they found Michael Cohen guilty of this whole process, well, then it makes sense that Donald Trump will be found guilty as well. And that's the one thing that you need to think about. I keep hearing people coming to my page saying, well, what if he gets off? What if he gets off? Are you serious? Do you think he's going to run the table on 34 felony charges? Do you really fucking believe that? Especially with the way the trial's gone up to this point. Of course, that's not going to happen. Reasonably, Donald Trump may be convicted of multiple felony charges yet this month. Michael Cohen may be the last witness for the prosecution. Then it's up to the defense. Now, the defense may have a couple of witnesses or no witnesses. Remember, the defense also has, all they have to do is leave a reasonable doubt, and they can win the case. Now, they haven't done that as yet, but if they don't have any witnesses that can prove that, they maybe have a hard time calling some people up. I think they'll call some people up. I think Donald Trump may be pushing to be one of those witnesses. I'm sure the lawyers are pushing back and saying, no, bitch, you're not going to be a witness because you're just going to make it worse. We'll see who wins that little argument, if there is, in fact, an argument. But this is going to be an interesting rest of the month. Like I say, he may be convicted of multiple felonies. And as I've told you before, I think that when that happens, it is going to be the end of Donald Trump. And people say, what do you mean? For whatever reason, people think Donald Trump is a superhero, that he can handle anything. And maybe that's what he's led us to believe, but he's just flesh and blood, a lot of flesh and blood. He's going to be 78 years old, and he's not healthy in the first place. Think about that. Taking all your money, being convicted of multiple felony charges, facing the possibility of going to jail, at best case, going into appeals court and having to spend more money that you don't have on legal fees. And then you have 3 more trials coming up at some point between now and after the election. So this is a lot of pressure on Donald Trump. Even Donald Trump, who is delusional and a narcissist, has got to be seeing the end, and that the end game is not good for him. Certainly the people around him have seen it. Anybody with any intelligence can see that Donald Trump's not going to get out of this without a conviction or 20 or 30. And then the question is, what do you do then? It damages the prospects of him winning the election. I mean, he's not going to win the election anyway, but this would just put a final nail in the coffin. Even the people around him would have to admit, well, we're fucking done. And that's just days or weeks away. So I'm kind of excited about that situation. We'll talk more about the trial and Michael Cohen in a little bit, but we've got a few emails we need to get to. First one says, hi, Boomer. I don't know if you allow this on your show, but here goes. Attached is a link for the episode of Glenn Kirshner's podcast in which he gives instructions on how to submit a judicial complaint against Cannon. I learned that you do not have to be an officer in the court to submit complaints, and he gave me a link. And by the way, you don't know if I allow this or not. My fucking podcast, I do whatever I want. I don't feel any threats from other podcasters. This is a different world than what radio and TV was. You know, you've got 3 or 4 shows running at 8 o'clock. Yeah, there's some competition, but there's plenty of space and time for podcast. People listen to my podcast at different points in the day. Glenn Kirshner and I aren't in competition. And even if we were, Glenn's a lot smarter than I fucking am. So you're more than welcome to do that. And I have checked it out. And it is interesting. It's not something I'd ever thought about, but apparently anybody can complain about a judge, and you don't even have to live in the state. You don't have to do particularly anything. And if you want to find this link, what I would do is just um, Google Glenn Kirshner. His last name is spelled Kirschner, and then maybe judicial complaint, and you'll come up with it. Or if you go to YouTube, you can probably see the video yourself. Now, the emailer said if 100,000 complaints or 1 million complaints make it there, just maybe it will get some attention. At least this is some action we can take, as opposed to just sitting around watching her poke her head out of Trump's pocket. Be safe and sane, my brother. Regards, Pete. Well, thank you, Pete. And I appreciate the tip. Yeah, I don't know if it's going to work or not. I don't know if they'll listen to even 100,000 or 1 million people, but they're going to have to do something. And you know, this is what we're about in this country. The media can do what they want. The politicians can do what they want. But if the people of this country rise up and extend their wrath, these people end up folding up and dying and doing whatever is most expeditious for them. They won't do it until there's some pressure. So I'm all for putting more pressure on these motherfuckers. All right. Thanks, Pete. Next one says, hi, Mike and fellow Boomer Brigade. Hope you enjoyed your vacation. Mike, you deserve it. Thank you. I had a great time. Thanks for leaving pods to run daily. You're part of my morning coffee routine. Enjoy Eric as always. Second time to watch with Jace. He seems like a down-to-earth guy. Is he a former MAGA or just a former Republican? Jace is a former Republican. I don't know that he was ever MAGA. Old soul, what more can I say that others haven't? She's well researched and also down to earth. First time seeing Ed, and I really like him as well. Hope he makes more appearances soon. Basically saying, I like the lineup. Keep up the great work. Yeah, Ed's generally on. I try to get him on every week because it's always a fun show to do and it's always informative. And he offers a lot of things that I can't, so it helps to balance out the show. I'll be talking to him later in the week, so maybe he'll be on Friday or Saturday of this week. He goes on to say, my question is in regards to Hakeem Jeffries and his voting to save Johnson. I was having an online discussion with someone on another commentator's chat group, and this person was saying they don't trust Jeffries and calling him a traitor. Really? If you were going to talk about a traitor on the Democratic side, Hakeem Jeffries is not the one. It really took me aback as I'm pretty sure this person has been in that chat group for a while and is a blue waiver. I think Jeffries had no choice but to save Johnson quickly so the funding could get in place for Ukraine, Taiwan, and yes, Israel. That is a bit of a boiling point for me. Something needs to be done to force Bibi to do the right thing and or have the people of Israel demand either better from him or new leadership. So he voted to save him. Also, saving him helps keep some stability in the House for now, and at the right time, sacrifice Johnson up for the MAGA faction. I get the Dems have had plenty of opportunities to remove Johnson, but it's a political game that requires skill and timing. What's your take on Jeffries and what he has done? Well, anybody that suggests Hakeem Jeffries is a traitor and is siding with the Republicans, you haven't been fucking paying attention. You don't know what you're talking about. Once again, this is about some of the things I've talked about before. People have in their mind what they want, and if they don't get exactly what they want, they fucking pout, and then they start screaming bloody murder. Well, fucking stop it. The situation with Russia and Ukraine has become untenable. The Republicans have done everything they can to block funding to Ukraine. That had to be done. If we don't hold back Russia, then Poland might be next. And now we're talking about NATO countries, and now we're talking about a third world war because all the NATO countries will get involved. You got to look farther than the end of your nose. You've got to look beyond what's right in front of you because there is more to the fucking game. There's 6 months left in this particular before the election. Six, actually more than that because it goes to January. But there's a short time left in this session. There is no way the Republicans were ever going to let a bill for Ukraine pass. So I'm sure Mike Johnson sat down with the Democrats and said, "Look, I'll help you pass the Ukraine thing because I think it's important too." And in exchange, you save me from getting my ass kicked out of the speaker's job. I'm sure that's what the deal was. It's a matter of it's kind of like the TikTok thing. The TikTok thing was just a bargaining chip. The TikTok thing isn't going to happen because the way the bill was written, it was so weak and it's going to be kicked out by the courts. The TikTok ban's not going to happen. But we know the Republicans are all about performative situations. So they wanted that TikTok thing in there so they could try to blame Joe Biden, even though a Republican wrote that bill. And the same thing with the Ukraine funding. They offered to save Mike Johnson to get the Ukraine funding. Instead of reading into this that Hakeem Jeffries is somehow a traitor, maybe you should look at it this way. This is how important the Ukraine funding is, not only to this country, not only to Ukraine, but the entire world. So they were willing to give a little bit, the TikTok thing and saving Mike Johnson. Now, beyond that, saving Mike Johnson makes sense too. Mike Johnson barely got in. They had trouble finding somebody who could get enough votes to be Speaker of the House. It's going to get even tougher if they have to do it again. Now, you're probably saying, well, who cares? The Republicans can just flounder. But here's the deal. If there is no Speaker of the House, absolutely nothing gets done in the House of Representatives. And I'm sure the Democrats don't like the idea of the entire House of Representatives being paralyzed because MAGA fucks want to dick around. There's nothing about being a traitor in this whole thing. It's about negotiating something out and giving a couple of things away because it's only going to be there for a short time. Come the election, and when the Democrats control the House, you'll see that TikTok thing fade away. And of course, Mike Johnson won't even be Speaker of the House at this point, so he'll be a non-issue. People always like to look at the bad or the scary first. I don't know what it is about people, but that's what they look at. But if you look a little closer, you pay attention, you look at the facts, it isn't hard to figure this out. I'm no fucking genius. I just slow my mind down, don't panic, and take a look at what's going on and try to determine why it's going on. And if you do that, you'll see exactly what I see. All right. The next email says, "Hi, Boomer. I figure we have this in common. Anything on our bucket list is about places to go and visit." Yeah, I'd have to agree with that. In terms of doing things, I do the stuff I want to do. And if I haven't done it, it's because I didn't fucking want to. But you could challenge me to write a 1 million item bucket list, and I still wouldn't think of going to an all male wilderness camp with Clarence Thomas. What the fuck? Yeah, I saw that too. In one of the many gifts that he's gotten, RVs and crazy trips. There was one trip that Clarence Thomas went to an all male wilderness camp. I don't think I even want to know what goes on there. Well, what's the point? I'm not going to any all male anything. I'm a male and I don't want to hang out with a bunch of males. I'm more interested in talking to women generally. Some men are intelligent too, but that's just a weird thing. Just a weird thing. Now, when you consider the fact that he's married to Ginny Thomas, now it almost makes sense. Get the fuck away from Ginny Thomas, even if I have to go to an all male wilderness camp. He goes on to say, on a separate note, you sometimes say, show me a data point. I don't know if it was 10,000 or 50,000, but let's be honest and acknowledge that was a big crowd Trump assembled in New Jersey. The New Jersey rally, Donald Trump and everybody else was talking about it, how it was 100,000 people that went out there. It's not true. Roger Stone showed a picture of the crowd. Unfortunately, it was found out that it wasn't a picture of that crowd. It was a picture of some event in Rio de Janeiro. Nice try, dumb fuck. The other thing to consider about the crowd that was at the rally, it was probably more like 15, 20,000. And you're right, that does seem like a lot. But something interesting happened at that rally, I'm hearing. Donald Trump went on ranting and raving as he does. And before it was over, there were a ton of people leaving from the back and some in the front. They were just taken off. They got tired of hearing the bullshit. And I thought this was interesting because we know these people are cult members. When have you ever seen cult members leave a speech from their cult leader saying they've had enough? Now, I did talk about this on TikTok, and somebody came to my page. Oh, they were just leaving early because they had to get their Ubers. Yeah, I'm sure that's why 5,000 people left or 3,000 people left. You motherfuckers make up the dumbest excuses and expect people to believe it. I don't even know if you realize how stupid you sound. You're absolutely right. The crowd was pretty sizable in a blue state. This was kind of a red district, but you wonder how many of those people were from that one area. Or, Donald Trump's got people like the deadheads that follow around the Grateful Dead. They'll travel all over the country, quit their jobs, and sell paraphernalia along the way. And I think that's kind of what's happening too with Donald Trump. Um, it doesn't worry me at all. Donald Trump is imploding as we speak. Um, he will always have a set base that follows him anywhere and believes anything he says. But just keep in mind, there isn't enough of them. Um, there isn't enough of them to vote him into office. The emailer says, I'd like your perspective on his ability to draw a crowd. Well, give you an example. We had a house fire in my neighborhood just the other day, a lot of smoke. So I went by there and I saw all kinds of people lining up on both sides of the street. It's a residential area and there was a traffic jam and people were out there with their kids watching this fire. You'll get a crowd at a train wreck and you'll get a crowd with people who are going to a wrestling show like WWE. And the thing about it is there will always be some people that want to show up thinking something big is going to happen, or that they are in love with this cult leader. Um, we're talking about not the brightest folks in the world showing up at these things, and that's why they're there. Now he goes on to say, "I will tell you that where that was or can pull from a pretty robust pool of jerk offs from Philadelphia and its immediate suburbs. I wonder if it's kind of a WWF or WWE or circus kind of draw, or like old Grateful Dead shows. I didn't read this ahead of time. This is purely coincidental. They pulled the like minded form a pretty big geographic radius. Deadheads were willing to drive to see the band. And we're right on the same page here. It is a wrestling event, it is Deadheads or Trump heads or dirty diaper heads coming to see Donald Trump. I think that's they won't come to the trial, but they'll come to a fucking rally. He goes on to say, I will admit it unsettles me to see those crowds. Best garage door Jeff. Yeah, don't worry about that. He'll pull crowds here and there, but his crowds are dwindling too. They're not like they used to be. And in order for Donald Trump to win an election, he needs the entire Republican Party unified in supporting him. Unfortunately, that's not the case. They don't. He needs some independents too, and they pretty much abandoned him too. He doesn't have a chance to win shit. Yeah, he can draw a big crowd sometimes, not most of the time, but sometimes. But again, not big enough. Even if it was 100,000 people, and it wasn't, um, it still wouldn't be enough. Now, keep in mind, Donald Trump isn't having the rallies he once had because he's busy in court and doesn't have the money. So it's easier for people to save up and go to these random rallies and make it there because they can't bounce around the country anymore because he's not doing enough. Yeah, don't get too upset about that. Garage Door Jeff has a PS, of course. PS, years ago, after his third divorce, that piece of shit Bannon lived in Miami. He was described as hardly having furniture and not really living like a domesticated person. After he moved out of his house was a wreck and had signs of being a meth house. He's extra special. Only the best people. Yeah. You just have to look at him. What do the kids used to say? He looks tore up from the floor up. Yeah, he's in bad shape. This motherfucker's doing something illicit in terms of drugs. You don't look like that, even at his age, without having some medication going on. All right. Now, as I've said, Michael Cohen is testifying today, and it could prove to be quite a shit show. In fact, Michael Cohen might drop a bombshell when he testifies in the former president's ongoing criminal hush money cover-up case in New York. This was said by a former prosecutor. Former federal prosecutor Gene Rossi appeared on CNN over the weekend, where he was asked about Michael Cohen's upcoming testimony in Trump's criminal trial. Trump stands accused of paying off adult film star Stormy Daniels, of course, to influence the election. Now, the host asked, can they be surprised by new documentation or invoices? And he said, I don't think there are any new documents that they're going to provide, he said, with a caveat. But I will say this, when a witness is meeting with the prosecutors and provides inculpatory evidence against the defendant, the prosecutor doesn't have a duty to turn that over or disclose it. That being said, he noted, if there's evidence said that goes to their credibility, yes. So we don't know exactly what he has said up to this point. Michael Cohen and all of his debriefings, that is. He may be coming out with stuff that we have never, ever heard before, conversations that we did not know about. And I've said this before. Going into this trial, we knew a lot, but we don't know everything. And there's going to be things coming out that we've never heard, that the jury's never heard. And none of it is going to be good for Donald Trump. Trust me on that. It's not going to be good for Donald Trump. So the whole thing is going to be interesting. As I said, it's going to be a shit show. If there was ever a time when Donald Trump will break or violate that gag order, it'll be this week while Michael Cohen is on the stand. Michael Cohen's kind of in your face. He's kind of confrontational. He's kind of a loudmouth like Donald Trump. You get two of those fucks in the same room, well, there could be some sparks flying at this point. So it's going to be very interesting to watch. A lot of people have said to me, oh no, Michael Cohen is talking too much. He's going to hurt the case. No, he's not. As I said yesterday and on TikTok, if they thought he would do any damage to the case, he wouldn't be called to testify. I think there's a lot that we don't know about what Michael Cohen might say, and we'll find that out soon enough. And there may be some things that even the defense doesn't know. And when that happens, and when there is some damning evidence or even some name calling, Donald Trump's not going to be able to help himself. I guarantee he's going to say something. Whether it will go to the level of violating the gag order, I'm not exactly sure, but he's certainly capable of it. It's certainly possible. Then it's a matter what Judge Marchand will actually do. Will he put him in jail for a short period of time? I'd like to see that because I think Donald Trump will realize he's not as tough as he once thought he was. Now, we were hearing about Paul Manafort. He was Donald Trump's campaign manager, that, of course, was convicted of multiple crimes and went to prison up until the time Donald Trump gave him a pardon. Well, there's talk that he might be back working for Donald Trump again. But apparently, he will no longer be assisting party officials ahead of the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee this July. Manafort was Trump's 2016 campaign chairman, who the former president later pardoned, announced he was going to stick to the sidelines in a statement on Saturday following criticism of his unofficial role with the campaign. He says, as a longtime staunch supporter of President Trump and given my nearly 50 years of experience in managing presidential conventions, I was offering my advice and suggestions to the Trump campaign on the upcoming convention in a volunteer capacity, Manafort told the New York Times. However, it is clear that the media wants to use me as a distraction to try and harm President Trump and his campaign by recycling old news, like how you were convicted of multiple felonies. And I won't let the media do that, he continued. So I'll stick to the sidelines and support President Trump every other way I can. Now, the Times previously reported that the political advisor had been on the ground in Milwaukee where he attended planning meetings for the convention. Oh, he was going to be there. He was going to be involved until the heat got a little too hot in the media, and they decided, well, let's pull him back a little bit. We don't need to have any more problems than we already do. And what problems could there be? Well, having a convicted felon working inside the RNC might be a problem. Now, according to the outlet, Manafort was expected to advise convention organizers on the staffing structure of the platform committee, but would not have had input in the party platform itself. He is a seasoned convention strategist. Manafort was first brought into the Trump campaign to secure the 2016 Republican nomination amid an intense in intra-party battle for delegates. Now, Manafort has also worked for the late Senator Bob Dole's 1996 presidential campaign. Managing the GOP convention in San Diego that same year, Trump pardoned Manafort in 2020 after he served 2 years of a 7.5-year sentence. And I'm thinking he's a little edgy about the prospect of going back to jail, so he's going to step lightly. Now, adding to worries over Manafort's criminal history, additional concerns arose about his role with the RNC after the Washington Post reported on Friday that he was helping launch a Netflix-style streaming platform in China. Yeah, Joe Biden's the one that's cutting deals and getting money from China, but so is Paul Manafort. And Paul Manafort is sidled up next to Donald Trump. You know, as I've said, you remember way back, we found out that Donald Trump had a bank account in China. He had financial interest. Even though he says he doesn't, he certainly does. He also has many financial interests in Russia. We know they like to try to pin that on Joe Biden and suggest he's the one that's doing it, but that's not the case. The fact is that it is Donald Trump, and he's in heavily with the Chinese and the Russian the country of Russia. So, in order to cover that up, they decide they'll make noise about Joe Biden and nobody will bother to look at what they're doing. Well, they were wrong. We all know what is fucking going on there, and it's absolutely ridiculous. So, Paul Manafort, who is a flat out convicted felon, was pardoned and was let out of jail after 2 years into a 7.5-year sentence. But I think Paul Manafort may have occasion to get back in there. He can't be tried for the same thing again. But Paul Manafort has done a lot of shit. This guy is a creepy, corrupt criminal from the word go. And no doubt some other things will be found out about him after the election. And Paul Manafort is going to have a problem. I can't believe Paul Manafort, who's been involved with conventions this long, really believes that Donald Trump can win. I just don't see how anybody of any intelligence can see Donald Trump winning. And then what? You do all this shit, you sidle up next to Donald Trump, and then he doesn't win. You got nothing. And you would think that they'd be able to figure that out ahead of time, be able to look ahead a bit and see what's ultimately going to happen. But no, they keep doubling down and they keep supporting Donald Trump, and they will do that as they fall off the fucking cliff. So, to each their own. They can do what they like, but they're going to fucking lose. All right. We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back. Well, we know Donald Trump's time is tight these days. He's spending a lot of time in court, but he does have some days off, typically Wednesdays and on the weekend. So he's got to make hay while the sun shines, and he's got to do some campaigning. Sandwiched between his appearances in court, Donald Trump headed on Saturday to the Jersey Shore, where he repeatedly blamed President Joe Biden for the criminal charges he's facing as the presumptive nominee prepares to face off in the November election, and called his New York hush money case a Biden show trial, which is really interesting because that is a state case, not a federal case. And the president has no say over what happens in a state case. Donald Trump knows that. The people around him know that, but he's going to keep spewing that in order to try to affect the narrative somehow. But Donald Trump is losing at every turn, so it's really not doing much good. And I found it interesting that he went up to the Jersey Shore. Everybody's worried about who's going to be his campaign or his vice presidential candidate. And if he's going up to the Jersey Shore, maybe he's looking at Snooki as a possible VP candidate, or Mike. What was his name? He had a weird fucking name. The what was he? Not the problem. You guys know what I'm talking about. Anyway, he was on the Jersey Shore and he was screaming about how Joe Biden is making his life difficult. Fact of the matter is that the situation. That's who he is, Mike. The situation. I don't know why that matters. Anyway, um, he wants to blame it on Joe Biden. He's blasting Joe Biden he's calling him a total moron, which was ironic that he would say that because if there's a moron in the room, it's going to be Donald Trump. Now, they say Trump was standing before a crowd of tens of thousands, repeatedly characterized the cases against him as politically motivated and timed to harm his ability to campaign. Well, you can choose to believe that, but then I would have to wonder if you believe that COVID was a hoax, especially after 1 million people died. Or would you believe that the election was um, illegal because Donald Trump didn't win? Well, 60 court cases and nobody saw enough evidence to even take it up. So you can believe Donald Trump at your own peril. Now he goes on about Joe Biden. He's a fool. He's not a smart man, Trump said of Biden. I talk about him differently now because now the gloves are off. Now because you're a flip floppy motherfucker. That's why. Trump is the presumptive Republican presidential nominee. He's not the nominee yet. He drew what his team called a mega crowd to a Saturday evening rally in the southern New Jersey resort town of Wildwood, 150 miles south of New York City Courthouse, where he's been forced to spend most weekends sitting silently through his felony hush money trial, which he's doing as we speak, at least if it's after 9 o'clock Eastern time. Lisa Fagan, spokesperson for the city of Wildwood, told the Associated Press that she estimated a crowd of between 80 and 100,000 attendees based off her own observations on the scene Saturday, having seen dozens of other events in the same place. Well, she may have said that, but all the pictures we've seen suggest more like 20,000. But it doesn't matter because I'm not surprised about tens of thousands of dumb fucks in this country. And as Garage Door Jeff suggested, it may be a situation where you have a Grateful Dead effect, where people from all over the country are following him around again. He's not having the multiple rallies that he once had because he doesn't have the time nor the money. So people may be, like I said, making hay while the sun shines and gets to the rallies when he finally does have one. Now, Trump was joined on stage by several high level endorsers, including North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum and NFL Hall of Fame linebacker Lawrence Taylor, who is still listed as a registered sex offender after pleading guilty in New York in 2011 to misdemeanor criminal charges of sexual misconduct and patronizing an underage prostitute. So, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, who's a billionaire but essentially a nobody and didn't even make a ripple in the primaries, and Lawrence Taylor, a registered sex offender. Yeah, you only know the best people, right? Now, the beachfront gathering described by Representative Jeff Van Drew, a Republican from New Jersey, as the largest political gathering in state's history, was designed to serve as a show of force at a critical moment for Trump, who is facing dozens of felony charges in 4 separate criminal cases. Now, hours before he was scheduled to take the stage, thousands of Trump loyalists donning Never Surrender T-shirts and red Make America Great Again hats crowded onto the sand between the boardwalk and the carnival rides to greet Donald Trump. The everyday American people are 100% him, said Doreen O'Neill, a 62-year-old nurse from Philadelphia. They have to cheat and smear him and humiliate him in that courtroom every single day, O'Neill said. This country is going to go insane if they steal the election again. Well, I would say the country is already insane. They're either insane or they have PTSD from the insane, meaning MAGA, meaning Donald Trump. It always strikes me interesting that nurses often will support Donald Trump. I've heard this more than once, and I don't know what it is. Maybe they're afraid of the Democrats coming up with some health care plan, a one-payer health care plan, and they think it's going to affect their jobs. I don't know. I don't know. And there's no really there's no account for the people that support Donald Trump. A lot of stupid people, a lot of susceptible and gullible people, but there is some smart people, presumably smart people. But I will tell you this: there are people that have jobs and educations and diplomas and that sort of thing. Just because they have those things doesn't suggest they're smart. Doesn't suggest they're not gullible. You don't have to be red meat eating Trumplafuck to believe what Donald Trump is spewing out. And apparently, people in other economic levels are believing him too. Trump's extraordinary legal woes, which include 3 other unrelated criminal cases, have emerged as a central issue in the campaign. Well, of course. Trump has repeatedly accused the Biden administration and Democratic officials in New York of using the legal system to block his return to the White House. No, dude, you're doing just fine on your own. Prosecutors allege the former president broke the law to conceal an affair with a porn actor, and that would have hurt his first presidential bid. Now, on Saturday, Trump posited that even those whom he accuses of politically motivated prosecutions didn't bring every case they could have, pointing to the boost his campaign has sustained with each wave of charges. Yeah, you may have gotten kind of an intermittent bump in fundraising, but you're still only fundraising half of what Joe Biden has done. You want to talk about support? Well, I think fundraising is the best example because people have to put their money where their mouth is. If Donald Trump had as much support as Joe Biden, then I would gather that he would be raising just as much money, but he's not. So there's some kind of disconnect here, something that doesn't make sense. And to me, it's the polls that suggest that Donald Trump is neck and neck with Joe Biden. I think that's absolute bullshit. I don't know how that can be. I don't know what they're asking or who they're asking or what they're doing with the data, but I'm not buying it. And if you need proof as to the veracity of polls, just go back to 2022 when they told us there'd be a red wave and there wasn't. Goes on to say, I heard they were going to do a couple of other things, and they said from Washington, we're indicting him into the White House, Trump said. They said, don't do it. Well, Trump seized on his legal woes Saturday a judge's gag order, and the threat of jail limit Trump's ability to comment publicly on witnesses. Yeah, a lot of people said, oh, he wants to go to jail. He definitely wants to go to jail. No, he doesn't. Otherwise, he'd be in jail by now. He's scared to death at the prospect of going to jail, and he's going to do his best to keep his mouth shut if he can. If he can. Like I said, Michael Cohen will be on the stand today, and presumably for a week or two, maybe not that long, but for a while. And the idea that Donald Trump will behave himself for the entire period that Michael Cohen is on the witness stand when he's spewing the things that Donald Trump does not want to hear, that's a stretch. I think he will be gabbing, and I think he will get himself in trouble. But we'll see. We'll see if the lawyers have been able to put a muzzle on that stupid motherfucker. The judge in the case already has fined Trump $9,000 for violating the order and warned that jail could follow if he doesn't comply. And I think that is really the only other option that the judge has. Now, the order doesn't include references to the judge, Juan Marchand, whom Trump called highly conflicted, or District Attorney Alvin Bragg, both of whom Trump said are doing the bidding for crooked Joe Biden. A state district attorney and a state judge is doing the bidding for Joe Biden. While the Supreme Court is hashing out whether or not Donald Trump has immunity, the very thing that he's accusing of Joe Biden and the judges in this particular case is exactly what he's doing with the Supreme Court. So fuck him. Now, Trump's responsibilities as a defendant have limited his ability to win over voters on the campaign trail. And that's something that's seriously a problem. The only thing Donald Trump can really do is campaign. And with his time being tightened up, his money going by the wayside, well, it's a little tougher for him to do the things he needs in order to run for the presidency. And I'm sure he's feeling the pinch right at this point. Now, when Donald Trump is at these rallies, on the rare occasion now that he's at a rally, he says and does some pretty crazy shit. He's slurring his words, he's making up words. And it's becoming more elevated. It's accelerating as we speak. Now, two professional psychologists this weekend explained why they're growing increasingly alarmed at what they say is former President Donald Trump's deteriorating mental state. Harry Siegel, clinical psychologist and senior lecturer in the psychology department of Cornell University, and John Gartner, a psychologist and former assistant professor at Johns Hopkins. These are pretty accomplished folks. University Medical School, John Hopkins University Medical School hosted a podcast on Saturday where they discussed the urgent need to talk publicly about Trump's mental stability heading into the 2024 presidential election. He said, we're going to be documenting his cognitive deterioration. We talked about that during the podcast. I always say to people, look at Donald Trump right now because that's the best Donald Trump you're ever going to see because dementia is a deteriorating illness and his rate of deterioration is accelerating. This is coming from a psychologist. Gartner then scolded the media for largely avoiding questions about Trump's mental acuity while running multiple stories about President Joe Biden's age. I don't know what it will take for the mainstream press to actually ask the question, is there something wrong with Trump's brain? He said once, I think even if I was caught wandering down Fifth Avenue in pajamas, they wouldn't ask the question. Actually, he said, if I shot somebody on Fifth Avenue, I wouldn't lose any support. Now, the doctor went on to say, I don't know what it will take for the mainstream press to actually ask the question. I repeated that for a good reason, because he makes an excellent point. When is the mainstream media going to do their job? The mainstream media didn't do their job in 2016, and that's largely why Donald Trump became president. And that's largely why of the problems we have in this country, from a million COVID infectees dying to the economy going to shit until Joe Biden stepped up. There's a lot of things that are on Donald Trump's plate that he can be accused of and held responsible for. All right. I think I talked about this earlier, but it's worth talking about again. Longtime Donald Trump friend and confidant Roger Stone came under fire on Sunday after posting an unrelated photo in an effort to show the state of New Jersey could be won by Trump in the upcoming 2024 election. Now, Trump spoke in the Garden State on Saturday and was criticized for his apparent slurring of speech. Conservative lawyer George Conway went as far as to challenge the mainstream media for failing to properly report on the president's aphasia. Trump bragged about the size of the crowd in New Jersey, but it was also reported that some people started leaving early. Now, Stone attempted to bolster Trump's New Jersey rally on Sunday. Yeah, New Jersey is in play for Trump. Could Joe Biden draw a crowd like this? Stone asked, including a photo of a large crowd. The problem for Stone, however, is that the commenters instantly identified the photo as fake. At Ben the Dem wrote, except this picture is fake. Go take a shower and put your helmet back on. Another one said, hey, Roger, why are you showing us 30-year-old pictures of a Rod Stewart concert and trying to pawn it off as a Trump rally? You know, a lot of people were walking out of Trump's rally while he was speaking, right? Another user wrote Sunday, he was so bad, even his own fans got disgusted and left. Social media platform X ultimately posted a note below Stone's message. This photo is from a Rod Stewart concert almost 30 years ago. Some people would say Roger Stone and the Republicans are dumb, and I don't know if it's so much that as opposed to that they think all of us are dumb. And in some cases they're correct, but not the vast majority of people. Now, according to Listverse, the photo is actually a representation of a record for what is deemed the largest music concert in history. On December 31st, 1994, Rod Stewart performed at Copacabana Beach in Rio de Janeiro in front of an estimated 3.5 million to 4.2 million people. Isn't that like Roger Stone? They were lying and saying that there was 100,000 people there, so they thought they'd bump it up a bit and show pictures of a concert where there were 3.5 million showing up. I mean, the things they suggest, the things they do are just fucking absurd, and they think people are going to buy into it. Now, this was the largest free concert in recorded history. It was produced by MTV and performed on New Year's Eve, the report says. And again, this took place at a Rod Stewart concert 30 years ago, not just the other day in New Jersey. Again, how stupid do they think we are? Conway poked fun at Stone being corrected, saying, I've always wanted to visit Rio de... how do I always wanted to visit Rio de New Jersey someday. I'll get around to it. Someone asked Conway, why do they feel they need to lie? Well, that's all they've got, frankly. That's all they've got to do is fucking lie. They can't tell the truth because then they'd have to admit that they are fucking losers. So that's why they lie. Now, I don't usually talk about Fox News or some of the hosts, occasionally Sean Hannity, occasionally Tucker Carlson when he worked there. But there's another clown on Fox News that I have a particular dislike of. That is Mark Levin. Fox News host Mark Levin warned President Joe Biden that he better damn well hope Donald Trump wins his Supreme Court immunity appeal. Oh, really? I wonder why. The former president and current Republican nominee is appealing to the Supreme Court with the claim that he cannot be charged for alleged crimes committed during his administration because of presidential immunity. The case has significantly delayed Trump's D.C. criminal trial, which is being prosecuted by Jack Smith. And we know that that's what the Supreme Court is doing. They're working on Donald Trump's behalf in slowing everything down. But the reason why they're suggesting that they better get the immunity for the president because Joe Biden may go on trial afterwards. Yeah, I doubt that. First of all, the Republicans won't be in power. Donald Trump will not be the president, and it's absolute bullshit. Donald Trump suggests that if he doesn't have complete immunity, you can't be president. Funny, the 44 presidents prior to him didn't need it. Nobody went to jail. Nobody was prosecuted. The only person that was close would be Richard Nixon, and he was pardoned. Now, near the end of Life, Liberty, and Levin, the conservative firebrand said Biden better hope Trump wins the appeal because he has recorded a long list of crimes committed by the current president. Love to hear what the crimes are. More importantly, I'd love to see the evidence because that's the one thing you guys have always come up short on. You got a lot to say, but no evidence to back up your bullshit. It's going to be very interesting how this shake out. He went on to say whether it's the border and the deaths and the damage and the slavery that's taking place there as a result of you, whether it's your violation of federal law, the Empowerment Act, withholding munitions that were passed by Congress, a clear violation. What he's suggesting is that Joe Biden could be prosecuted for any number of these things, and he can't. Let the dust off the Espionage Act. Oh, yeah, because we have a report that says that you violated on multiple grounds. A matter of fact, you sold out your country to a publisher for $8 million, spewing classified information from the government. It's a long list, Joe. You better damn well hope lose that immunity case. You don't lose that immunity case in the Supreme Court. Well, here's the deal. If Donald Trump is making official acts as president of the United States, you Republicans know as well as I do that Joe Biden can't be indicted as a sitting president. Donald Trump couldn't. Had he been able to, he would have been. But these people only look at themselves, consider themselves victims, and cry and whine about the things that affect them, never ever imagining that it would come back to them and slap them in the face. Well, Donald Trump's not going to get the immunity, and people will be freaking out because then Donald Trump is pretty much fucking done. He's going to be pretty much done after the Manhattan District, which doesn't come into play in terms of the immunity because everything he did in that situation was prior to him being president. Now, here's one that's interesting, and I have to wonder if this gentleman couldn't get sued over this. Senator Rick Scott stuck by his attacks against the daughter of the judge overseeing former President Trump's criminal case on Sunday, claiming she is a political operative. Here's the important thing to understand about Judge Marchand's daughter. She is not a public person. She doesn't have the protection a public person might have, and the people defaming her don't have any protection either, because this could certainly hurt her career or her family relationship or anything. So conceivably, she could sue Donald Trump over this shit, or Rick Scott in this case. Now, what Rick Scott's trying to do, he's trying to do what he knows Donald Trump can't do. If Donald Trump did that, he'd go to fucking jail. So Rick Scott is going to kiss the ass, the dirty diapered ass of Donald Trump, and do his bidding. but I don't know if he's going to get away with it very long. That could be an interesting situation. And I got to believe Judge Marchand's uh, daughter could sue him for defamation of character. And we know how those defamation cases have been going lately for the Republican Party, particularly Donald Trump. Now, Scott was in New York City on Thursday to support Trump in his criminal case. Yeah, he showed up to the case. Donald Trump got tired of hearing that nobody shows up for him, so he started demanding people to show up. Eric Trump showed up. Ken Paxton from Texas showed up. And of course, Rick Scott, the most criminal, dumbest motherfucker in the U.S. Senate. Now, in front of the courthouse, Scott attacked the daughter of Judge Juan Marchand, claiming she was a Democratic operative and that her work tainted the judge's impartiality. Well, how is that possible? She's an adult. She has a career. She has a job. And whether it is contradictory to what the judge um, might have to find, doesn't make a difference. She's an adult. She doesn't influence the judge, and apparently the judge doesn't influence her. The judge's daughter, Scott said the judge's daughter is a political operative and raises money for Democrats. Well, so the fuck what? Your Supreme Court justices take money from rich Republicans. Your Supreme Court goes on special trips to all male wilderness camps because Republicans fucking paid for it. See, it's all good when they do it, but if they have a hint or an inkling that it's happening with the Democrats, they're like screaming memes, like stuck pigs, and they're crying and whining as they typically do. Now, when questioned in a Fox News Sunday interview about why he personally went after someone who is not in politics, Scott doubled down. Of course he did. He's not a bright man. The Democrats are using the court system to go after and prosecute criminally a political opponent, Scott said. They're just thugs trying to stop Trump from being able to run for president. I've heard that many times, and okay, fine. But there's evidence that he broke the law. He doesn't get a pass because he was once a president of the United States. And when the Supreme Court comes back with their decision on the immunity situation, it'll all be very clear. Scott went on to say the judge's daughter is a big Democrat fundraiser, he continued. Everybody involved in this is part of the Democratic machine. It looks horrible. No, it doesn't. Even if what he said was true about the judge's daughter, she's an adult. She's an individual. She's able to do whatever the fuck she wants. And it doesn't have to impact the judge. He's an individual in his own right. He's been on the bench for decades. He knows what the fuck is up. And certainly his daughter doesn't influence him. Because I got to tell you, I got two sons. They don't influence me, I influence them. The daughter, Lauren Marchand, previously worked at a progressive consulting firm and has represented Democratic aligned groups as an attorney. So this is a bit of a stretch, but they're trying very hard and it's not working. Trump's previous attacks on Marchand were widely derided as unnecessary and too personal. Some of Trump's initial claims were based on falsehoods spread by fake news accounts. A hearing on the matter later found that to be the case. Now, Representative Mike Lawler said at the time that families should always be off limits, criticizing the former president. Trump's attacks were part of an attempt to get Judge Marchand to recuse himself from the case, which he did not. And let's be honest, even if he did get him to recuse himself, that doesn't change the trial. That may cause a bit of a delay, and obviously with Donald Trump, that may be enough. But there's no way that Judge Juan Marchand is going to recuse himself, especially when we got somebody like Aileen Cannon down in Florida who should legitimately recuse herself and refuse. Or Clarence Thomas in the Supreme Court when hearing cases about the January 6th insurrection. He should, without question, recuse himself, but he doesn't. So why in the world would Judge Marchand recuse himself over absolute bullshit? Now, the trial in the case continues this week, as you know, after some of the case's most significant witnesses testified in court last week. It is unknown whether Trump himself will testify. And that's the interesting thing. Will Trump testify? I would say if the lawyers had anything to say about it, it would be an absolute no. He would not testify. That would be absolutely stupid. But then, of course, Donald Trump is suggesting, well, maybe I will testify. Well, we know he lies all the time and he talks a big game, but when it comes to backing it up, he doesn't do very well. Then some other people think that Melania will have some input because she's so embarrassed about what a piece of shit that her husband is that she might try to force him to testify. I don't even know if that's possible, if that's something that he would do. But we're getting close to the end of the prosecution's case. And then the defense has to put on a case. I don't know that they have many witnesses coming. A lot of all the witnesses that have come so far have been in Donald Trump's inner circle. So might they call back somebody who's already been up there? Or are they saving the best for last and letting Donald Trump testify? Again, I find it hard to believe that they might do that, but if Donald Trump and Melania put on enough pressure, they may not have a choice. And I'm praying that he does testify. I know he'll go up there thinking that he'll game this whole situation with his perfect oratory skills and change everybody's mind. But understand, that's not going to happen. He's not that good at it. In fact, he's horrible at it. I would love to see him sitting on the stand because the main thing that will happen is he'll end up coming out worse for wear after it's all said and done. All right. We are going to wrap up the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.